Okay, I've been able to solve the tracking issues, the error issues, and I figured it would be a nice idea to give you some experience in how you drill down into the program and solve these kinds of problems. So, okay, so what was the problem originally? We've got, if we go to I'm using Matlab 2013A here, and if I run the track fiber program and then go into fabric and then select the fabric and then select the points as we did in class, everything works. If I hit enter, it tracks and it's doing everything just the way you think it would. Okay, great. And from track fiber, then we can go to map fiber, hopefully, or map line 1, capture or select the data that we just captured, and it works pretty good. Okay, so we're happy with that. But if I go into the new version of Matlab, so I'm going to minimize this and go into the new version of Matlab and do the exact same thing on the exact same data, track fiber, what happens? Let's see, let's go to fabric and pull that up, select our points like we did before, select 5 points, hit enter, and then we get an error. Oh, great. Okay, so what's going wrong? So what do? You drill down. Let's close this first, and then we drill down into the editor. So obviously the edit or the problem is in the program called plot frames. So we click on that, and the plot frames program apparently has some kind of a problem where it's not displaying, and there's going to be some kind of issue with the plot function. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. So you set a breakpoint. Let's set a breakpoint here. And then go back to track fiber, do it again, select the points, enter, and we're broke here. So, okay, so then we'll step through, and then what we see is that I file is 1, which means that the for loop is going from 1 to 0, which means nothing's going to happen. But that's actually what we wanted to happen, but in the new version of the program, this line is going to fire an error. So let's just examine that line by copying it and going into the workspace. I'll have to do that here. 2015 into the workspace. So we'll run that. I control paste and run that. Oh, look at that. Data cannot have more than 2 dimensions. Well, what it turns out to be is that in the previous R2 2013, the plot command didn't care if it was empty. It would just not plot anything. But in the new version, it wants everything to be perfect in terms of the matrices that are submitted to it. So, what do? Well, let's take a look at the displays, what we have here for displays. So I'm going to Control C, and I'm going to say temp equals Control V, displays. Well, it's empty. Oh, well, that's not very good. Considering that displays is an existing variable, so why is that? Well, that's because the P value here is null, which means that it's going to provide a you should be able to retrieve the 2 dimensions of the matrix, but in the new R 2015, it won't do that anymore. So let's see. So what do? Well, let's make it a non-empty array. Let's just go ahead and look back at the program, and what can we do? Well, I think that the problem is that P is equal to 1 to I file minus 1, because and this is because we prefer to have the computation from the previous image, but that's okay. We can make it from the current image. So let's change it. Let's change I file. Oh, I have the right, and then take I file and take it to I file. So now it's quite a simple change, isn't it? So now we'll save that. We're still in a hold mode here, or breakpoint in Mapline. So let's take it out of the breakpoint by going to the editor and quit debugging. Let's take the breakpoint off, and then let's see what happens here. So it's not a problem in plot frames. It's actually a problem with what we're sending to plot frames. So let's go ahead, take these out, and save it. Okay, so now let's try it in the new version of Matlab. 2015. Track fiber. All right, let's see what happens. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Enter. Oh, looks like it's working. Okay, so it definitely is an issue with how they've done things in the new version of Plot, and that should do for that. All right, at least we got some education in how you drill down and look into troubleshooting, because you're always going to have problems with troubleshooting of programs. Even if everything seems perfect, things are not going to work, and you have to learn how to dive down into the program and solve the problems. So breakpoints, etc. Okay, great. Now we'll look at the superslicer program. Okay, so as far as superslicer goes, if we take a look at the superslicer window, when we run it, apparently the contours don't appear in green anymore, like they should in the previous versions. And so what do you do? So let's drill down and look at the function itself. So the contour function has apparently been dramatically changed between R2013 and R2014, which extends to 215. So let's take a look. So what I've done is I've got into the superslicer program here, the M file, and found the place where the line where it identifies and calculates the contours. Now, in the old version, in R2013, if we take a peek at the handle for the contour function, which is provided through as a return, you see we've got a number, and that's because it's a handle. And if you drill into the handle, you see that the children property contains the vertices of the contour points, or lines, that is. So then that will progress through properly. But if we go ahead and look at the new version, this is our 2015, and we take a look at what happens when you do the same exact function, they've changed it. So TCH is no longer a handle, it's actually a set of properties, which we'll have to change directly instead of implicitly as before. So that means that there is, and you go to here, and CH, the children property, is empty. Oh, well, that's not good. So why is it empty? They've changed it, so, well, let's go ahead and Google on it and see, well, Matlab contour has no children. Okay, so there is somebody who said that. Okay, why is the children property empty for some object? So we click on that, we find out that charts object clip can contain handles to underlying objects, but in the new release of Matlab, these objects do not contain handles to underlying in their children properties. So we have to do a pretty dramatic reworking of the program And we can see that contour is empty now in the new version, and it gives advice to use contour properties to modify the contour lines. Okay, and that's verified by just looking at this once again. If we look at T-children in the old version, you see we've got the properties, and then we can manipulate them in children's property. But in the new version, you see that T-children is a different kind of thing, and so if we try to get that property, it's empty. And that's also verified by looking at the actual properties. So we do a get TCH here, get TCH, because I've set a breakpoint, so we're sitting here in a breakpoint, and we see that, indeed, the children is empty. So we'll have to rework that and figure that out. It take a little bit of time because that's a little bit more of a challenge than your basic modifications. Okay, and I'll get on that as soon as I can. So I hope this is helpful in terms of like drilling down into a program. There's no magic here. When sometimes things change in terms of the functions that you use in Matlab, and you just have to adapt and understand how they work. And this is an example of drilling down into the functions and understanding what the variables are and where they are located and what they are containing. So, once again, I can now type track fiber, and I can track in the new version of Matlab. I'll just select a whole bunch of points here that we're going to track, and it tracks, and it works quite well. And once it's done, in just a second, we can close this figure window and then type map fiber and select the data that we just tracked, and it will calculate your strains. Okay, so I hope this is really helpful.